You're watching Future News in English here. It is Tuesday, January 13th. I'm Yumna Naufal. These are today's headlines. The suicide bombing in Tripoli is largely coordinated from Rumi's B block, where further terror plans were found in yesterday's raid. The families of the kidnapped soldiers and policemen block a road in Beirut after new threats by Jabhat al-Nusra. And Charlie Hebdo prepares to publish 3 million copies of its new edition as the world mourns the death of last week's terror attacks. Documents seized during the Rumi prison raid show that Islamist inmates were planning further terrorist attacks in Lebanon. Files seized in the operation revealed that several terrorist attacks across the country in the past had been directed from inside the prisoners' operations room. Security forces stormed Rumi's notorious Block B yesterday, moving all 900 Islamists to Block D and putting an end to previous conditions where inmates were allowed to operate with impunity from inside the prison using cell phones and internet. Interior Minister Nuhad Mashnout said security forces have seized all phones in a move he said aimed to stop a process of communication that was facilitating terrorism, and vowed to cut off heads if mobile phones were allowed to be smuggled into prisons by corrupt guards. The relatives of the Arsail hostages have blocked a road near the Grand Sarai in downtown Beirut, one day after the Al-Qaeda-linked Al-Nusra Front issued a new threat against the soldiers and policemen that were taken captive in the summer. The relatives gave the Lebanese government until Wednesday to give them news about the captives, threatening to take escalatory measures if the deadline was not met. The protest comes after the relatives held talks with Druze spiritual leader Sheikh Naim Hassan, and after the Nusra Front published on Twitter several pictures showing the kidnapped policemen and soldiers laying face down on the snow with 5 guns aimed at their heads. The pictures were captioned with the phrase, "Who will pay the price?" a line used in the past when the Nusra Front sought to threaten the execution of one of its captives. More than half of families in Tripoli are suffering from deprivation, with the figure rising to more than 4 in 5 families in the Bibit-Bini neighborhood, according to a newly released study by a UN body. The Urban Deprivation Index, put together by the Economic and Social Commission for Western Asia, revealed that 57% of Tripoli's families are struggling to attain an acceptable standard of living, and of those, 26% are considered extremely deprived. The index is based on 4 factors: economic status, accommodation, health, and education, which are each measured by 3 indicators. In the Bibit-Bini area, 87% of households are considered deprived, and out of these, about 52% live in extreme deprivation. Nami's mayor has announced that he will not follow the cabinet's decision to extend the deadline for closing the town's infamous landfill, and promises direct action to shut the facility down on time. Yesterday's cabinet session decided on a technical extension of the landfill, which was supposed to close on January 17th. Speaking at the Voice of Lebanon, Mayor Khalil Matar said the town has begun preparations for a huge protest at the doors of the controversial landfill. The head of the pro-Krzef Socialist Party, leader Walid Jamplat, repeatedly rejected any delay in closing the facility and promised to call for mass demonstrations if the cabinet decided to do so. But the PSP chief also still not commenced on Parliament's decisions to extend the closing deadline. The snow on the Damascus highway has melted enough to allow the passing of cars, although trucks remain barred from crossing. The road is the main highway linking Lebanon to the Syrian capital and connecting the Bekaa Valley with the capital and the coast, and has been blocked by large amounts of snow after last week's blizzard. Meanwhile, the other road linking Zahlit to Tarshish remains closed for all vehicles except cars with metal chains. The Directorate of Civil Aviation says the weather will remain fine during the day, but that rain will fall again starting tomorrow afternoon, with snow at 1,100 meters above sea level. Speaker Nabi Habib is praising the dialogue between Hezbollah and the Future movement, saying it has achieved major results. In comments published by Ash-Sharq Al-Awsat, the speaker stressed that the dialogue is serious and that it encompasses more than just easing Sunni-Shia tensions. Biddy pointed out an agreement on national security that was discussed at the second meeting as especially important, and said the rival parties had agreed on the need to lift the political covers of those sabotaging security. Hezbollah and Future movement have held 2 rounds of talks so far at Biddy's residence in Ain al-Tini. Coming up next, the Pope visits Sri Lanka, a country still recovering from a 37-year ethnic conflict. Stay with us, we'll be right back. 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 We'll be right ba Welcome back. You're watching Future Television, the English news here at 4:20. Funeral ceremonies are being held for 7 of those shot dead in last week's terror attacks in France, and 3 officers have been bestowed with France's top honor, the Légion d'honneur. Despite the death of 5 cartoonists at Charlie Hebdo, the magazine still plans on publishing a new edition this week. More details in this report. In Charlie Hebdo's first edition since Islamist gunmen attacked the satirical weekly, the magazine plans on publishing a front page showing a caricature of the Prophet Muhammad, with demand rising for the edition. The weekly plans to print up to 3 million copies, dwarfing its usual run of 60,000, after large numbers of customers began placing orders. The front page of the January 14 edition shows Muhammad with a tear on his cheek, holding a sign saying, "I am Charlie." Below the headline, "All is forgiven." The magazine's lawyer, Richard Malka, says more cartoons featuring the Prophet Muhammad will be featured, and it will make fun of politicians and other religions. The new issue comes only 1 week after Islamist gunmen raided the magazine's offices and killed 12 people, including 5 cartoonists. Although the 3 gunmen involved in the terror attacks, Sharif Kouachi, Saeed Kouachi, and Amedi Koulibaly, were all killed by police officers on Friday, French police say as many as 6 members of the terrorist cell involved in the attacks may still be at large. One suspect, Hayat Boumediene, is still on the loose. Police officials say authorities have been searching the Paris area for the Mini Cooper registered to Koulibaly's widow, Boumediene, who Turkish officials say is now in Syria. One of the men believed to be part of the cell has been seen driving Boumediene's car around Paris in recent days, although officials do not know his level of involvement in the terrorist cell. In light of the ongoing threats, France has begun to deploy 10,000 troops to protect sensitive sites, including Jewish schools and neighborhoods throughout the country. Following the attacks, European countries have seen a rise in Islamophobia, with over 50 anti-Islamic acts reported in France during the past week. In Dresden, Germany, 25,000 people have attended an anti-Islam rally after organizers declared it a tribute to the victims of the Paris attacks. The group, which calls itself Patriotic Europeans Against the Islamization of the West, or Pegida, says the terrible acts in Paris are further proof that Pegida is needed. The latest protest, however, was met by nearly 100,000 counter-demonstrators nationwide, accusing Pegida of exploiting the French attacks. Chancellor Angela Merkel has thanked leaders of Germany's Muslim community for condemning the Paris attacks, saying Germany wants peaceful coexistence of Muslims and members of other religions. The Muslim Council has announced plans to hold a rally to promote tolerance, condemn the attacks in Paris, and respond to Germany's growing anti-Islam movement. Merkel is set to join the rally, saying it will send a very strong message. This comes after a record 3.7 million people marched in anti-terrorism rallies throughout France on Sunday, marking the largest demonstration in the nation's history. World leaders joined French President François Hollande, including British Prime Minister David Cameron, German Chancellor Angela Merkel, Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas, and Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. The march is mostly proceeded in silence as protesters mourned the 17 lives lost during the terror attacks. In a rare public admission of error, the White House said the U.S. should have sent a high-level official to a unity march in Paris that was attended by more than 40 world leaders. The Obama administration was represented at Sunday's march by the U.S. ambassador to France, though Attorney General Eric Holder was in Paris for security meetings.
And some have asked whether or not the United States should have sent someone with a higher profile than the ambassador to France. And I think it's fair to say that we should have sent someone with a higher profile to be there. That said, there is no doubt that the American people and this administration stand foursquare behind our allies in France as they face down this threat. And that was evident throughout last week when you saw that the President's top counterterrorism advisor here at the White House was in touch with her French counterpart minutes after the report to this terror attack first emerged.
Turkish Prime Minister Ahmet Davutoglu says EU membership for Turkey would send a positive message of peace and religious tolerance in the wake of attacks by Islamist extremists in Paris. Negotiations over Turkish membership in the European Union has been ongoing for nearly 10 years and includes several controversies, including Turkey's human rights record, refusal to recognize the Armenian genocide, and the relationship with the Republic of Cyprus.
Turkish membership will contribute to religious peace, cultural peace, and that should be the attitude. But if Turkey a secular, moderate country has not been accepted to EU because of a cultural prejudice, that will give a negative message to European people as well as to the world, that now continents are being divided and based on cultural and religious differences.
U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry says Pakistan must fight militant groups that threaten Afghan, Indian and U.S. interests, while offering sympathy for the victims of last month's massacre of children at a Pakistani school. Speaking in Pakistan's capital, Islamabad, Kerry praised Pakistani Prime Minister Sharif and pledged an additional $250 million from Washington to provide food, shelter and other assistance to help people displaced by conflict in tribal areas, in addition to the billions of military aid spent on Pakistan by the United States.
The relationship between Pakistan and the United States is not only about threats. It is not only about counterterrorism. It is also about building on opportunities that we have to create ties that make both countries more secure, more stable, more prosperous, more democratic. I want to be clear that while the United States' role in Afghanistan is changing, it is not ending. We remain deeply engaged in Afghanistan and in the region, and we will continue to train and assist Afghan forces as they secure their country. We will continue to consult closely with Pakistani leaders on recent developments in Afghanistan, and we're very pleased with the visits and the exchanges at high levels that have taken place between Afghanistan and Pakistan. We announced yesterday, I believe, over $250 million that will be allocated specifically to assist with relocation, with providing shelter and food, and the rebuilding of those areas where this military operation has taken place, so that something comes in behind the military operation that can build a more sustainable set of possibilities for the citizens there.
Pope Francis has arrived in Sri Lanka at the start of week-long Asian tour, the first papal visit to the country in 2 decades. Speaking at the airport in the capital, Colombo, the Pope said the island nation cannot fully heal from a quarter-century of ethnic civil war without pursuing truth for the injustices committed. Sri Lanka's long-lasting civil war ended when the Sinhala army cracked down on Tamil insurgents in 2009 in an operation many have linked to the genocide. Catholics make up less than 7% of the country's 20 million people, but the church counts both Sinhalese and Tamils as members and sees itself as a strong source for national security.
We're so glad to see our Pope because this year we got a new president to our country. At the same time, we are a Tamil minority people. We hope from the Pope visit we got a blessed. At the same time, we hope we can have our problem solved in this year. We so affected with so many wars and incidents, and so many incidents was against Tamil in Sri Lanka. We hope everything will be solved within this year.
This marks the end of our bulletin for today. Now for a reminder of our top stories. Security forces find documents proving Islamist inmates in the Rumi prison were planning more terrorist attacks. The families of the kidnapped soldiers and policemen block road in Beirut after new threat by Jabhat al-Nusra. And Charlie Hebdo prepares to publish 3 million copies of its new edition as the world mourns the death of last week's terror attacks. Those are your Tuesday headlines live on Future Television. I'm Yumna Nofal signing off. Have a good night.